manager's role is to create the conditions for their people to succeed. So learning how to do that upwards is going to help you be able to do it downward. And if nothing else, learning how to manage upwards is going to teach you what kind of a manager you want to be and what kind of manager you don't want to be. So it's just a great way to hone your skills about people management by managing upwards.
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Leadership. You've heard it said, and you know it's true, people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. For many people, the primary ingredient in job satisfaction is not the quality of food in the lunchroom. It's not the office layout or equipment. It's not even the workload or salary or benefits. It's the relationship with the boss. In fact, one study showed that 65% of workers surveyed would choose a new boss over a pay raise. Many organizations still promote people because of their technical success rather than for management skills. To compound the problem, many new managers receive little or no training before jumping into their new roles. This makes for unhappy campers in the workplace. But as an alternative to the futile search for the perfect boss, you might consider working better with the boss you have. That's the premise of Mary Abbajay. She's author of the book, Managing Up, How to Move Up, Win at Work, and Succeed with Any Type of Boss. A seasoned leadership development consultant, Mary offers tips on how to deal with some of the most perplexing challenges in the workplace. Mary, welcome to Leadership.
Thank you so much, Roger, and congratulations on this podcast. I've been a big fan of yours for a long time, and I'm very excited to see you spreading your wings into the podcast realm.
Well, thank you very much. There seem to be countless books, TED Talks, workshops, and YouTube videos on how to lead and manage downward, but you provide one of the few treatments on how to manage upward. Why is there such an imbalance?
Oh my gosh, Roger, that's a great question. And I'll tell you, I think it's because America is in love with leadership, right? We teach it, we preach it, we hit everybody over the head with it. Everyone's got to be a great leader. We spend tens of billions with a B dollars on it every year, but we don't really talk about what it means the other way around, how to be, and I'm going to use the F word, how to be a good follower, right? Because people don't like to think of themselves as followers. And I think that when we take out half the equation, we're taking out half the strategies. So instead of thinking that everyone has to be a leader, and by the way, we all need to lead, but we also all need to be followers as well. We all have to lead and follow, oftentimes at the same time. I think the reason we don't like to think of ourselves as followers is because I think we confuse and conflate being a follower with being a patsy or being a pansy or being a sycophant. Because if we only look at this relationship in the sense of a power structure, then that's all we see. So I want people to rethink their manager, subordinate, manager, follower, boss, employee relationship reframe it from a power construct into a relational construct. And in a relational construct, we all have agency, right? We all have something to put into the relationship. So while we may not like the idea of being a follower, the truth is that we all have to do it at points in our career. Even CEOs must be followers at times too, when they have to report to their board of advisors, their corporate board. So really it's about everybody has a boss. Let's learn how to do this thing well.
Sure, it applies to everyone.
Applies to everyone.
Speaking of followers, most every leader was once a follower, and as you've pointed out, they're still a follower. If they have a board and they have stakeholders somewhere. What are the 2 or 3 key things that a follower should learn and practice in preparing to be an effective leader?
Yeah, I love that. The first thing that we want to recognize is that managing up is not about managing the person, it's about managing the relationship. It's about making a concerted effort from where you sit in that relationship so that it works for you, it works for them, and it works for the organization. So it's really about figuring out how to make this relationship work, even if there is a power differential between the two parties, so both can find success. And when we think about that, what followers can learn from that about being leaders is that leadership in the 21st century is really much more about influence than authority. When we use a command and control model, we will get compliant. People will do what you tell them to do because they have to do it. When we use more of an influence model, then we get engagement and commitment. And that's really what we can really get that influence, that engagement, that commitment when we actually pay attention to the other person. So really, if you are learning how to manage up now, this will help you be a more effective leader because it's going to help you understand how to navigate and influence people who may approach work differently than you. It's about being able to look past your own needs and perspectives and consider the needs and perspectives of other people. And this will help you become a better manager because you are managing people, not things. A manager's role is to create the conditions for their people to succeed. So learning how to do that upwards is going to help you be able to do it downward. And if nothing else, learning how to manage upwards is going to teach you what kind of a manager you want to be and what kind of manager you don't want to be. So it's just a great way to hone your skills about people management by managing upwards.
Yes. Well, I'd like to drill down a little bit on a couple of things you said. For some people, the notion of managing up sounds like manipulation or becoming, as you said, a sycophant. You use the term managing up to mean taking charge of one's workplace experience and relationships, as you just said. When you teach people that this kind of empowerment is a choice, what kind of pushback do you get?
Ooh, that's a great question. Oddly enough, I don't get that much pushback. And the pushback I get tends to be from people who are, shall I say, less seasoned in the workplace, people who are younger in the workplace or more recent in the workplace. And I think this is because they may still think that the world's a meritocracy, and they may think that their managers are good at being managers, or that their managers even want to be managers. So I think some of it's a little bit of like, well, they should be able to manage. And you know what? They should be able to manage. So that's where most of the resistance comes from. And I put it into sort of three buckets that resistance is based on. One is ego. Two is a fixed perspective. And three is simply resistance to change. So the ego resistance rises up when we get caught in how things need to be the right way. When you hear people say, well, my boss should do this, my boss needs to do that, and we get all caught up in the shoulda, coulda, woulda, and our ego prevents us from actually widening our perspective. Like we get trapped in our own view of how things should be or how things were sold to us or how we expect them to be. And once we get trapped in that perspective, we're not able to actually zoom out and consider the broader experience and the different strategies that we could use. So then our fixed perspective gets to be like, well, I'm the way this is, and this is, that this is the way it needs to be. And if it isn't going to be this way, then I'm just not going to play. And that really gets us trapped in a couple of things. One, it stops us being smart. Oftentimes we'll get hooked by our amygdala, our reptile brain, our fight or flight. And it just doesn't accept reality. So for example, yes, your boss should be good at communicating. Yes, your boss should give you more feedback. Yes, your boss should care about you. But what if they don't? Chances are your boss isn't going to change. And the third thing that happens is we don't want to change, right? We all kind of like the way we operate and we all kind of think this is the right way to do it. And truthfully, managing up, down and across, by the way, actually requires us to sometimes adapt and change our approach when interacting with other people. It often requires moving out of our comfort zone, and it requires us trying on different behaviors. And, change is hard. I mean, most of us would really prefer the other to change. So these are some of the things I think create a little bit of pushback, is that people, it's so much easier, Roger, to be like the victim. It's so much easier to just complain about your boss than it is to actually find ways to work it. I will tell you this, the pushback I expected when I started this work, I expected managers to push back on me. But the thing is, I think the people that love this the most are actually the managers. And it's not only because they think this will help them build better relationships with their team, but what I hear over and over from managers who attend my workshops and my presentations is they start thinking, oh my God, what kind of a boss am I? Oh my God, am I that micromanager? Oh my God, am I ghosting people? So I think the self-awareness that managers have gotten from this book has been really kind of very rewarding for me.
Well, again, I'm going to piggyback on something you said. How do you help people honestly consider that their own behaviors might play a significant role in the discomfort that they're experiencing in the workplace? A lot of people seem to have blinders on, and they project a lot on other people, but it never occurs to them that they might be part of the problem. How do you disabuse them of that notion?
Such a great question. And you're right. So there's three things. One, self-awareness. Two, self-awareness. Three, self-awareness.
Right.
And we know that human beings are not as self-aware as they think they are, right? This is why I love Dr. Tasha Euroch's book, Insight, because she talks about how really unself-aware human beings are. So we really have to try to open people up to self-awareness. And the way that I have found the most success is to really get people to think about not only like your emotional intelligence, self-awareness, like what are you feeling? What drives you, your expectations? Those are really important, but we've got to get people to actually understand their impact on other people, how their words, their deeds, and their behaviors land on other people. How do other people experience you? Because until we can understand that, we really don't have enough self-awareness. So we have to understand how our actions, our reactions, our interactions are impacting others and impacting our relationships. So I found the best way to do this in a way that people are kind of open to is to really talk them through like different communication and collaboration preferences, to show them that the way that they like to work isn't necessarily the same way others like to work, and that the way they work, which may be perfectly fine, and it probably is perfectly fine, might have not the positive impact they want on someone with a different preference. So I take people through things like their pace of work. So I'm a very high, fast-paced person, as you can tell by how quickly I speak. So my fast pace might land very differently as someone who prefers a more moderate pace. So getting people to understand that. Things like task versus relationship. Some people are very relationship at work oriented. Hi, how are you? What's going on? Other people are more like, where's the Penske file? So understanding how these dynamics are going to play into the relationship building. Some people love the details. Some people not so much. Introversion, extroversion, change versus stability. Like you walk people through these different continuum of preferences of communication and work style. And that really starts, I think, to help people open their eyes a little bit about, my boss may not be the jerk I think he, she, or they are. Maybe they just like more details, or maybe they just are a slower decision maker. And so getting people to understand that these normal different preferences are always at play when we're talking about communication, collaboration, and work style. And of course, I love me some personality assessments. Like those can be really helpful to help people start to realize how we work differently.
Well, and again, it goes back to self-awareness.
Yeah, I had this young woman in a workshop come up to me and say, Mary, my boss is trying to sabotage my career. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Tell me about that. And she's a first year law lawyer. And she said, well, he says I move too fast, but I know the truth is that he's just jealous of how quickly I get work done. And I was like, well, that's a really interesting story, because that's what we do. We make up stories about people with different preferences. I'm like, but have you ever considered just slow in your role for the first 6 months until he gets to know you a little better and he understands how you work. And she's like, grumbles about it, but agreed to give it a try for 6 months, which then again, email 6 months later saying like, you know what, that was exactly right. And now I'm working at a faster pace. I've got his trust and things like that. So when we see people who work differently, we've got to like keep ourselves from making up a story or projecting on them, right? Just because they work differently or have different preferences doesn't make them wrong and you right. It just makes you different.
Sure. Well, what's a good way to offer feedback to a boss who did not request feedback?
All right, before I tell you my secret here, I want to do a shout out to all the bosses who are listening. If you're a boss, a manager, a supervisor, please, I beg you, I beseech you to start seeking feedback. It will only make you a better boss. So if your boss is a person who might be open to feedback, they've modeled receiving it, go ahead and give feedback based on, the situation, behavior, impact model, or a critical conversation model using I statements. But if you suspect that your boss isn't open to feedback, has not modeled being open to feedback, then I recommend taking your feedback and turning it into a request. An effective request of this boss. Oftentimes, when we want to give feedback upwards, it's often a complaint of some sort. So I really recommend that people look for the request inside the complaint. Inside every complaint, there's a request. Like, it's too hot in here. What's the request? Turn on the AC, open the window, turn down the heat, find the request. And when you make a request to your boss or your supervisor, you want to make it effective. And an effective request has a couple of key pieces. One is you need to be clearly stating what it is you want or need. Then you want to talk a little about why you need it. How is this going to help you? And then you want to say what's in it for them, right? The with it. What's in it for them? What's in it for you? And then the last piece is to really show what you can do to help make this request happen. So for example, Roger, if you were my boss and I wasn't getting enough feedback from you, I wasn't getting enough communication with you, I might say, hey, Roger, I'm working on that Penske project and I think a little bit more advice or information from you would be very helpful. I think if I got that, I could deliver this project, early and under budget. So how about, would you be willing to meet with me for 5 minutes every Monday just to go over the details? I'll put it on your calendar. Boom. That's an effective request.
Right.
Just saying, can you meet more often with me? That doesn't help. Like, what does that mean? So make sure you tell what it is, why you need it, what's in it for them, and what you're going to do to make it happen.
Well, a lot of this is, as you've said, centers around getting better at having some of those uncomfortable conversations. And you need to be strategic about those conversations.
That's right. And, and it's funny because I read once a long time ago that something like 75% of people were reluctant to ask their boss to help them prioritize. And to me, that's just crazy. Like, if you don't know what's a priority, you should be asking your boss. People are often afraid that if they ask for things or they ask for help, that their bosses or managers will see them as weak or unprepared or, not in it to win it. And nothing could be further from the truth. So really being able to create the dynamic where you can have some of these more challenging conversations with your boss is really, really helpful.
Sure. No boss is going to say, don't ask me those questions. I don't want you to get better.
Right.
That's not going to happen.
And if you have a boss like that, you need to find a new boss.
Exactly.
Hey there, Leadership listeners. We have something special for you. As a thank you for tuning in, we're offering you a free copy of Roger Dean Duncan's award-winning best-selling book, Change Friendly Leadership. In this book, you'll discover a proven framework for leading change that people will actually buy into, without all the stress and resistance that often stand in the way. You'll also learn powerful strategies to improve relationships both at work and at home, creating a healthier, more productive environment for everyone. To claim your free copy, just head over to changefriendly.com. Don't miss out on this opportunity to transform your good intentions into great performance. Again, grab your free copy of this best-selling book at changefriendly.com.
When organizations promote people for technical skills instead of managerial skills, and we know that happens, the unintended result can be a technical expert who's a total bust as a manager. What are some proven strategies to manage up to somebody who's incompetent?
Yeah. And Roger, that is such a huge problem today. And then on top of organizations promoting people based on their technical skills, is what we're seeing is there's a lot of managers who don't even want to be managers, right? But it's the only way up in the organization. It's the only way to make more money, get a bigger office, have more influence. And so there's a lot of, unfortunately, incompetent managers out there. And the thing about having an incompetent manager is that the first thing you have to do is get past your anger. Right? I think an incompetent manager makes people very angry. It's very frustrating. It just makes us go grrr. And when we're in those kind of lower emotional registers into our amygdala hijacks, it's very hard to be strategic about that. So go ahead, scream and shout, vent it out, but then you've got to get strategic. You have an incompetent manager. What are you going to do? I would, first of all, try to enter this from a place of empathy, if you can, and thinking about how would you feel if you were incompetent and you knew it? How would you feel if you were incompetent and you didn't know it? Like, the more you can treat this as a human being, the better kind of range of choices that you will have. So trying to remember a time where you were unqualified for something or you didn't know what you were doing. How would you want to be treated by other people? So kind of go from that space, get past the anger, get into more of the empathy. Then I want you to figure out, like, where are they incompetent? Exactly how does the incompetence show up? Really see if you can't pinpoint what it is that they are not very good at. Are they really incompetent, or do they just do things differently than you? Do they not know your technical area, or do they not know how to manage people? So try to separate that and then prioritize what's really hardest for you and where you figure you can help out. And then you got to figure out what you're willing to do about this. So you can let an incompetent manager derail your career, or you can decide to make it work for you. So once you've pinpointed where they fail, see if there are things that you can do to compensate their failures, cover their failures. I know it's not fair and you'll hate doing this, but you need them to succeed for you to succeed. If the team succeeds, if your department succeeds, then you succeed. So find opportunities for you to compensate for your boss's weakness. Let's say your boss is a terrible communicator. Well, then take on the role to actually making sure that people on your team have the information that they need to have. Proactively provide technical solutions if your boss is incompetent in the technical things. So you got to find out where they're incompetent and then figure out how you can move into that space. And then, of course, take the long view. Maybe your boss will get competent, or maybe after a while you'll decide that you don't want to work for an incompetent boss. But you got to take the long view. If you concentrate on still doing great work, and you're building your relationships throughout the organization, somebody will notice. And my last piece of advice for this is learn what you can. I pretty sure that there's something that you can learn about this person, whether it's how they schmooze, whether it's how they've managed up, whether it's, how they have a great network, but they've done something to get this job. They must have some redeeming quality. So see if you can't figure out what that is.
When I have talked with some of the really fine leaders that I've worked with, many of them have stories about previous bosses who were difficult. And they typically tell me that because the leader that I'm talking to, got pretty good at managing up, that prepared them to be a better boss when they had the opportunity. Because you used the word empathy 2 or 3 times. They could empathize with people and they would ask themselves, I wonder what I'm doing that might really be bugging my people. And that opened up some good conversations.
Yeah, I have a workshop, Roger, called Your Team Hates You, and Here's Why.
Yeah. Well, now you've identified, if I recall, 10 types of difficult bosses. Tell us what 3 or 4 of those are and what they look like in terms of observable behaviors.
Yeah. So, and I limited myself to 10 because otherwise the whole book would have been about difficult bosses. I'll tell you kind of the top couple that that seem to drive people the craziest. Of course, you've got the micromanager, right? The person that's always over your shoulder, telling you what to do. Sometimes, usually they're nitpickers. Most micromanagers are nitpickers, but not all nitpickers are micromanagers. Then you have the ghost boss, right? This is the boss that just throws you stuff, throws you assignments, and then poof, disappears. You can't find them when you need them. They're not really giving you a support. You're out there in the ether all by yourself, and it can be pretty frightening. Another one that seems to annoy people is the impulsive. This is the boss that's constantly changing the goal line. Like that, you can always tell when they go to a conference because they're going to come in on that Monday, and when they get back with 10 new ideas, and those ideas will all be gone by the end of the day with 10 more. And it's like you're in quicksand, you don't know where you're going to go. And then seagulls are getting a lot of questions these days. And seagulls are they either swoop and poop. So they swoop in, they poop all over your work, and they swoop out. Or they swoop in and they scoop up your project and take it for themselves. So these are just a few things that you are going to probably bosses you're going to meet, colleagues you're going to meet, some what we call difficult behaviors that you'll have to navigate in the workplace. But you know that the micromanager is the one people hate the most.
Oh, sure. And straight talk is part of the solution for everyone. No.
Yeah.
How do you distinguish between a difficult boss and a toxic boss? We hear a lot about toxic workplaces now. So what's your advice for working with the toxic variety?
Yeah, so there's a big difference between the two. Whenever I hear people say, my boss is toxic, my boss is a micromanager, I got to say, no, my friend. A micromanager is not toxic. A micromanager is a difficult boss. Difficult bosses are bosses that are frustrating, that are annoying to you, that make you have to think about how you want to strategize around them. They might take up a bit of space in your mind, but you can figure it out. A toxic boss is someone who demeans you as a human being. These are screamers. These are shouters. These are bullies. These are narcissists. These are gaslighters. These are bosses who rule through coercion, who rule through bullying, who rule through demeaning and debasing the human at the workplace. And there's a big difference between someone who's difficult and someone who's toxic. When we are in toxic boss relationships or toxic work cultures, what happens is that our mental health and our physical health get deeply impacted. Studies have shown that those who work in toxic cultures or with toxic bosses have a 60% increase in the likelihood of heart disease, cardiac incidences, and stroke. Your immune system gets decimated, so you're much more likely to develop colds, flus, ulcers, all those kind of physical ailments. Our mental health takes a real beating as our sense of self-worth actually deteriorates, and we stop thinking of ourselves as people who are worthy, and we start thinking of ourselves as people who are unworthy. And so this is what toxic workplaces do. And what happens is because we stop feeling like we are worthy human beings, people that work in toxic workplaces tend to stay there longer than in other workplaces. So studies have shown if working in similar industries, the toxic industries keep people longer. And we think that's because of the emotional abuse that people take and their emotional self-esteem that plummets. And studies show that it can take upwards of 2 years to recover from working for a toxic boss. And I'll say, I think that number is way too low. I've been talking about toxic bosses for a couple of years now, and people come up to me and say, 2 years, it took me 3, it took me 4, I'm still recovering. So all of that is to say that if you find yourself in a toxic situation, some signs might be you are so miserable, you dread going to work every day, you feel unsafe psychologically or physically, you spend much more time and energy thinking about how to survive, you have no self-esteem. These are signs that you are in a toxic situation. So here's the thing people need to know. Nobody is coming to save you. Chances are HR is not going to save you. HR would probably love to save you, but very few organizations have an HR department that is strong enough to go against toxicity, because the toxic bosses in these organizations tend to be at the very top, or they tend to be politically protected, or they tend to be financially protected because they tend to be big rainmakers. So my serious advice is to people: you're never going to thrive with a toxic boss, but there are some things you can do to survive. So I'm going to give you some tips, but I want you to think about these tips in terms of what are you going to do before you save yourself and get out, whether you get out to a new organization or under that line of reporting, but you really have to figure out how you're going to save yourself. Number one, you got to protect your mental health, however that happens. Putting on a golden shield over your soul, like whatever you need to do. Zooming out, protect your mental health. Activate a support network. You are going to need people in your life who are going to keep you healthy, whole. Raise your self-confidence, raise your self-esteem, whether it's a friend, a spouse, a colleague, a paid therapist or coach. Get support. Number three, minimize as much direct contact as you can with this toxic person, especially if they're a gaslighter or a bully. So try to do that. And then start looking for options. I'm not going to tell anybody in this economic climate to just walk out and say, take this job and shove it. But I do want you to start looking for a different position or a different reality, because your life is important. Your career is important, and you should not let a toxic situation derail you.
I think it's sad that it takes people 3 or 4 years to recover from being in that kind of environment. And as you said, many people stay in that kind of environment because, to an extent, their mental capacity, their emotional capacity, is decimated to the point where they don't have the self-confidence to stand up and defend themselves or to be proactive. So it's quite the cycle.
It's quite the cycle. And it's interesting. Research shows that we find the most toxicity in what we call high meaning careers, things like law, medicine, education, and politics, because people often enter those fields with like a deep need to like serve humanity in some way. And so they often will stay in these jobs because they're like, well, I really love what I do. And, on top of the decimating of the mental self-esteem, it just is a perfect storm.
Let's go at this a little bit from the perspective of gender, if we could. What's your counsel for women trying to manage up a male boss? And conversely, what's your counsel for men trying to manage up a female boss?
I was going to make a bad joke and say women learn how to play golf, but I'm going to skirt this because I think when we go into these expecting gender norms, I think we do ourselves a disservice. So I would say, women and men may or may not manage differently. There is some research to say we do, but you want to take the person that is your manager as an individual into account. Try to let go of any sort of gender bias that you have and really take a look at that person's work style. What do they care about? What are they trying to accomplish? How does that person operate, communicate, and collaborate? So really, I want people to avoid bias, because if I can't go into this, I'm like, oh, my boss is a dude, so he's going to be a bro dude, then I am already filtering his behavior through the mental model that I've created. It might be right, it might be wrong. So I think the best thing I would offer people is to forget about the gender and just really take an honest, objective observation of how this person operates and what they care about, and go from there.
That makes a lot of sense. Check your own stories.
Always go back. Stories.
Right. Now, you suggest that most people can learn to work well with the boss they currently have, but what are the signs that it's simply time to move on?
Well, a big sign is if you're not growing anymore, right? So I think that's for any job. You're not growing anymore. You don't feel supported in your growth. Maybe you've reached like a plateau in that position, or if it's about your boss, maybe it's like you've tried many things and it still doesn't work. I mean, not every relationship is going to work, right? But maybe if it's a toxic boss, your self-esteem is plummeted. Maybe you're spending much more time thinking about how to navigate this relationship than you are about your work. Obviously, if you're feeling unsafe or damaged at work, or if you're just miserable every day and it's because of your boss, right? This is time to move on. And there is no shame in the game. People often will stay in organizations because they're like, oh my goodness, I've put so much time into this. And like, it's like that opportunity cost or or whatever the cost is when you put stuff, you've stayed there forever. But really what you want to think about, it's the sunk cost, right? Those are sunk costs. You're not getting that time back. But I want people to think about the opportunity cost, which is what are you losing by not putting yourself to your next best thing, right? So really take the time to really think about, is this time for me to go? What are the signs? If it is, then start looking. And, you have to manage your career. We all have to own our careers. Nobody can, will, or should care about our careers more than we do. And sometimes if that boss just isn't working for you, that boss just isn't working for you. So find a new boss.
Right. Well, one final question here, and you've touched on it some regarding empathy and listening and that sort of thing. But what's your advice for people who are the boss? How can they make it easy for their team members to manage up to them?
I love this question. Well, one, they could bring me into their organization and I could talk to their team.
Okay.
Always option. But really, it's about telling them. It's about having the conversation. Don't make your people guess about what's important to you. Tell them. I call it the preferences, priorities, and the pet peeves conversation. Have this. Give them an SOP of you. Make sure you're clear with them about your wants, your needs, your expectation. And of course, if you tell them what yours are, I want you to ask them what theirs are as well. Seek feedback. Find out if your management style has the impact that you think it has or that you want it to have. So much of our workplace dysfunction could be solved if we were more honest with ourselves and with each other. If we all did a little bit of what I call the platinum rule, which is treating others as they want to be treated. So finding out about communication preferences, finding out about collaboration preferences. And then if everybody just did a little bit more, a little bit less of little things a little bit differently to move closer to the other, we'd have much more highly functioning, highly engaged organizations, workplaces, and careers. So tell people what you want and then ask them what they want and find some place in the middle.
It always goes back to having those conversations.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. It's funny what happens when human beings actually talk to each other and they're honest with themselves and each other. It's shocking what can happen.
That's right. Well, thank you so much, Mary. You've made it clear that the goal of managing upward is not to curry favor. It's about being more effective, adding more value, and deriving more satisfaction from work. To learn more about Mary and her work, go to careerstonegroup.com. That's careerstonegroup.com. And to grab a free copy of my book, Change Friendly Leadership, go to changefriendly.com. That's changefriendly.com. In other episodes of Leadership, I share my exclusive conversations with many more top thought leaders who offer smart tips to boost your effectiveness in both your professional and personal life. Our guests include superstars like Stephen M.R. Covey, Liz Wiseman, Dory Clark, Marshall Goldsmith, Heather Younger, Bill George, Jessica Chin, Guy Kawasaki, and many others who have insightful things to say that you can put to good use immediately. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can stay informed on what's coming your way. Trust me, you don't want to miss any of our episodes. And please leave a comment, even if it's short. That helps promote the show to millions of new listeners. And if there's a smart thought leader out there you'd like for me to interview, just let me know. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and spread good cheer wherever you go. For Leadership, I'm Roger Dean Duncan.